Welcome to True Crime Chronicles, where we uncover the real stories behind America's most disturbing crimes. Every case has a beginning, and a truth that deserves to be told.
Please make sure to like and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date, please.
Case 1. Anthony Mcnite is one of Oakland's most infamous killers, and this is where the story begins. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Oakland was struggling with crime, poverty, and limited resources. During this time, women, many of them vulnerable and living on the streets, began disappearing. For years, the cases seemed unconnected, and the person responsible moved quietly through the city, avoiding attention and leaving little evidence behind. Anthony Mcnite was a local man who blended into everyday life. He wasn't on the police radar for most of the time the crimes were happening. Investigators later determined that he targeted women he believed would not be quickly missed, using trust and opportunity to get close to them. Because the victims came from similar circumstances, their cases were often overlooked or delayed, allowing the violence to continue. As technology improved, cold cases from Oakland and nearby areas were re-examined. DNA evidence became the turning point. Investigators were finally able to link multiple murders to a single suspect. In the early 2000s, Anthony Mcnite was arrested, bringing an end to a mystery that had haunted the East Bay for more than a decade. In 2008, Mcnite was convicted of multiple counts of first-degree murder, as well as attempted murder. Prosecutors described him as a serial predator who took advantage of society's most vulnerable. The verdict brought justice for several families, but it also raised hard questions about how long it took for those victims to be heard. Anthony Mcnite's case remains a dark chapter in Oakland's history, and a reminder that some of the most dangerous criminals hide in plain sight. Case 2. Charles Arnett Stevens. But Mcnite was not alone. Before him, and alongside him, another predator was operating quietly, leaving behind trauma, bodies, and unanswered questions. This is the story of Charles Arnett Stevens, one of Oakland's most overlooked serial killers. Charles Arnett Stevens was not a headline name. He never received a nickname from the media, and that anonymity is exactly how he stayed hidden for so long. Stevens lived in Oakland during a period when crime was rising and police resources were stretched thin. He blended into the background, another face in a crowded city. But behind closed doors, Stevens was violent, calculating, and escalating. Unlike impulsive killers, Stevens showed patterns law enforcement would later recognize as textbook serial behavior. Women across Oakland reported being attacked by a man who approached suddenly, used physical force instead of weapons, targeted victims who were alone, frequently strangled them until unconscious. This detail matters. Strangulation is one of the strongest predictors of future homicide. It is not about escape, it's about dominance. Several victims survived and reported Stevens to police. He was arrested more than once. But sentences were short, charges were reduced, and each time Stevens walked free, his violence escalated. By the late 1970s, the attacks turned deadly. Stevens began killing women across Oakland, often dumping their bodies in secluded areas, vacant lots, or places where discovery would be delayed. The victims shared similarities: women living on the margins, women whose disappearances didn't generate immediate headlines, women who were vulnerable and isolated. Many were beaten, several were strangled, some showed signs of sexual assault. At the time, police did not immediately connect the cases. Oakland was dealing with multiple crime waves, and without modern DNA, killers like Stevens slipped through cracks that cost lives. Detectives noticed similarities: same method of attack, same escalation pattern, same geographic clusters, but evidence was thin. Witnesses were scared, survivors struggled with trauma, and the killer knew how to disappear. Stevens continued offending, confident, emboldened, and reckless. It wouldn't be one single murder that exposed him, it would be his past. Police revisited prior assault reports. Names resurfaced, descriptions matched, and one suspect kept appearing over and over again: Charles Arnett Stevens. This time, investigators connected survivor testimony, prior arrests, behavioral patterns. Stevens was finally arrested and charged with multiple counts, including murder. For the first time, the violence stopped. In court, prosecutors painted a clear picture: a man who escalated from assault to murder. A man repeatedly released back into the community. A man whose crimes could have been prevented. Stevens was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. No death penalty, no national attention, Just a quiet ending to a brutal career. Charles Arnett Stevens eventually died in custody. No press conferences, no public mourning, just another inmate number erased. But for the victims and survivors, the damage never faded. Stevens' story exposes uncomfortable truths. How early warning signs are ignored. How survivors aren't always believed. How predators exploit broken systems, but his victims deserved the same attention. The same justice, the same remembrance, a reminder that the most dangerous monsters aren't always the ones we remember. They're the ones we forget. Case 3, the serial shooter. Mvin Ray Hughes. Oakland's random killer Mvin Ray Hughes was born on January 27, 1969, in California. Growing up in Oakland, he lived through rough neighborhoods, a world where guns and crime were never far from daily life. But Hughes' first brush with death came at just 17 years old. On September 16, 1986, Hughes got pulled into a drug-related dispute that would change everything. In a moment of violence, he drew a gun and shot 38-year-old Jesse Clarence Dunlap in Oakland. Dunlap later died at Highland Hospital from his wounds. Hughes was arrested, convicted of involuntary manslaughter, and sentenced to 8 years in prison, though he served only part of that sentence before being released back into society. But the violence didn't stop there. In January of 1999, Oakland was gripped by fear. A series of seemingly random drive-by shootings erupted across East Oakland, and police soon realized they were dealing with a single shooter. Between January 15 and January 29, Hughes roamed the streets in his car, opening fire on innocent victims, strangers he encountered on the streets. His method was chilling in its simplicity: drive-by, pull the trigger, and disappear. Here's how the spree unfolded. Dove timeline of attacks. January 15, 1999, 2200 block of 62nd Avenue. A man was shot and survived. January 16, Seminary Avenue, 20-year-old Terry Love was shot and killed, one of Hughes' first confirmed murders. January 23, Bancroft Avenue, another man shot, survived. January 27, same location, Bancroft, 3 men were shot, 33-year-old Robert M. Fisher died. January 28, 62nd Avenue and 48th Avenue, multiple people shot, all survived. January 29, 57th Avenue and 62nd Avenue, man and woman shot, survivors. Manhunt and arrest. As shootings continued, police began piecing together the terrifying pattern. They believed one person was responsible, someone driving around Oakland with a loaded weapon, and no mercy. Eventually, one of the cars used in the shootings was spotted and its license number recorded. That trace led detectives straight to Mvin Ray Hughes, and on January 30, 1999, he was arrested at a girlfriend's home in Hayward. Police found the 9mm semi-automatic handgun believed to be the murder weapon, along with 2 other cars linked to the rampage. Trial: not guilty to death sentence. On February 2, 1999, Hughes was formally charged with dozens of felonies, including 2 counts of murder, attempted murder, multiple assaults with a deadly weapon, and firearms charges. SFGATE. During the arraignment, his mother even fainted in court, a moment captured by media as nerves ran high. Hughes pleaded not guilty, maintaining his innocence through much of the trial. But the evidence was overwhelming. In 2004, a jury found him guilty on all major counts. However, they deadlocked on whether he should receive the death penalty. A second jury was later convened. On March 9, 2005, the new jury recommended death, and he was sentenced accordingly by Superior Court Judge Joseph Hurley, who called him the worst of the worst. In addition to the death sentence, Hughes received a 300-year prison addition, a safeguard in case the death penalty is ever overturned. Today, Mvin Ray Hughes sits on death row at San Quentin State Prison, awaiting execution, though no date has been set. What makes this case especially chilling isn't just the violence, it's the randomness. Hughes didn't target enemies, rivals, or those who wronged him. He targeted innocent people, shot from a car, without warning, without reason. And for the families of those injured, and the loved ones of Terry Love and Robert Fisher, the repercussions of that January still ripple through Oakland today. That was the story of Case 3, Mvin Ray Hughes, the serial shooter. If you found this story gripping, disturbing, or enlightening, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into the darkest corners of criminal history. Next up, Case 4. Wesley Brownley is one of the most unsettling crime cases in recent Bay Area history, leaving Oakland and surrounding cities on edge. In 2022, a string of shootings began to terrify residents across the East Bay. The attacks appeared random and unpredictable. Victims were often men walking alone at night, sometimes returning home from work or running simple errands. There were no robberies, no arguments, and no clear reason for the violence. The lack of a motive made the situation even more frightening, as anyone could be a target. As the shootings continued, fear spread quickly throughout Oakland, San Leandro, Berkeley, and nearby areas. Police departments worked together, trying to determine whether the attacks were connected. Ballistic evidence soon revealed that the same firearm had been used in multiple shootings, confirming the presence of a serial shooter. Despite this breakthrough, the suspect remained unidentified, and the public grew increasingly anxious. Investigators eventually focused on Wesley Brownley, a local man who was reportedly living a double life. By day, he appeared ordinary and unremarkable. By night, prosecutors later alleged, he stalked neighborhoods searching for victims. Surveillance footage, license plate readers, witness statements, and digital evidence slowly built a case against him. Brownley was arrested in October 2022 after police stopped his vehicle. Inside, authorities claimed they found a firearm and additional items that suggested he may have been planning further attacks. His arrest brought immediate relief to the Bay Area, where residents had been living under constant fear for months. Prosecutors charged Brownley with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder, describing the attacks as deliberate and calculated. The case sparked widespread conversations about gun violence, mental health, and the impact of random crime on entire communities. Wesley Brownley's case remains a chilling reminder of how quickly fear can spread when violence strikes without warning, and how one individual can change the sense of safety across an entire region. Case 5 in 2009, the city of Oakland, California, became the site of the deadliest day for American law enforcement since the September 11th attacks. This is the story of Lavell Mixon, a man whose life began in the shadows of the East Oakland streets and ended in a hail of gunfire that left 4 police officers dead and a community reeling. Lavell Mixon was born on December 23, 1982, and grew up in the deep east of Oakland. His childhood was marked by a revolving door of family instability and early exposure to the city's burgeoning drug trade. While those close to him described him as a young man who cared deeply for his family, he was simultaneously being pulled into the street life. By his teens, Mixon was already a known figure to local authorities, developing a deep-seated resentment toward the Oakland Police Department, whom he viewed not as protectors, but as an occupying force. Mixon's criminal record began in his youth, but his first major adult conviction occurred in 2002. At age 19, he was arrested for assault with a firearm and possession of a controlled substance for sale. This wasn't just a minor skirmish, it was a violent encounter that foreshadowed his willingness to use lethal force. He was sentenced to state prison and served time at various California facilities. During his incarceration, Mixon became increasingly radicalized and paranoid. He was released on parole in 2008 but almost immediately failed to comply with his conditions. By early 2009, Lavell Mixon was a parolee at large, a fugitive hiding in plain sight in the very neighborhoods where he grew up. Mixon's personal life was a source of both motivation and intense stress. He had a girlfriend and a young daughter, and his family claimed he was trying to go straight. However, the reality was much darker. During his time on the run, Mixon was suspected of being involved in a series of sexual assaults. His paranoia reached a fever pitch in March 2009. He knew that if he were caught, even for a minor traffic stop, his status as a fugitive meant he would return to prison for a very long time. He told family members he was not going back. The afternoon of March 21 started routinely. At 1:08 p.m., motorcycle officers Sergeant Mark Dunnican and Officer John Hega pulled over a 1995 Buick sedan near the intersection of 74th Avenue and MacArthur Boulevard. Mixon was the driver. As the officers approached the vehicle to check his identification, Mixon realized his time was up. Without warning, he opened fire with a handgun. He shot both Dunnican and Hega at point-blank range. As they lay on the pavement, Mixon stepped out of the car and fired, finishing shots, into the officers before fleeing the scene on foot. Dunnican died instantly. Hega would later be declared brain dead. The shooting triggered a massive, "officer down" call, bringing hundreds of officers from across the Bay Area to East Oakland. Mixon disappeared into a nearby apartment building on 74th Avenue, where his sister lived. For 2 hours, police cordoned off the area. Based on a tip, an Oakland SWAT team identified the apartment where Mixon was hiding. At approximately 3:20 p.m., the team, led by Sergeants Daniel Sakai and Irvin Romans, used a flashbang and breached the door. Mixon was waiting. He had traded his handgun for a SKS semi-automatic rifle. As the SWAT team entered the darkened apartment, Mixon fired through a closet door and walls. Sergeant Romans and Sergeant Sakai were both struck and killed instantly. A third officer was grazed by a bullet. The death of Lavell Mixon. The remaining officers returned fire, saturating the area where the muzzle flashes were coming from. During the chaotic shootout, Mixon was struck multiple times. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The tragedy didn't end with the gunfire. The city of Oakland was divided. While thousands attended the office's funerals at the Oracle Arena, a small but vocal segment of the community held a march for Mixon, viewing him as a victim of a system that had failed him. The investigation later linked Mixon's DNA to at least one unsolved brutal sexual assault that had occurred just weeks before the shootout. This revelation shattered the narrative some tried to build of him as a revolutionary, revealing instead a desperate man willing to commit any atrocity to avoid returning to a cell. Lavell Mixon's name remains synonymous with one of the darkest chapters in California history, a reminder of the volatile intersection between a broken parole system, urban violence, and the ultimate sacrifice of those in uniform. Check out this news clip.
In the history of the Oakland Police Department has there been a day like today. 5 Oakland police officers were shot this afternoon, and tonight 3 of them have died, and a 4th is in grave condition at Highland Hospital. The 5th officer was grazed by a bullet but not seriously injured. It all began when 2 motorcycle officers pulled over a Buick in East Oakland at about 1:15 this afternoon. Police say the driver opened fire and both officers were shot. One of those officers died. 2 hours later, 2 more officers were shot, both killed after a SWAT team located the gunman at an apartment building just a few blocks away. That's where the 5th officer was grazed. The SWAT officers killed the gunman. The first shootings occurred during a traffic stop at 74th Avenue and MacArthur Boulevard, just a few blocks from OPD's Eastmont substation. The other shootings occurred at 74th Avenue and Hillside Street. We have live team coverage for you tonight. Our David Stevenson is at Highland Hospital where the officers were taken. But we begin with KTVU's Mike Beback. He's at Oakland Police Headquarters where police and city officials just released late details. Mike?
Well, Heather, a very deep feeling of shock and sadness tonight here at police headquarters in downtown. 3 of their own are dead, another fighting for his life, and tonight flags are at half-staff on what is certainly one of the most tragic days in the history of this police department.
In these moments that words are extraordinarily inadequate, we come together in shock, in grief, in sadness and sorrow at a set of tragic incidences that had caused the death of several of our police officers.
Investigators say 2 Oakland police motorcycle officers were shot, one of them killed after the 2 made a traffic stop at 73rd and MacArthur at 1:08 in the afternoon.
I first want to offer my condolences to the officers that lost their lives today in the line of duty in our city.
A massive manhunt was immediately launched, and within 2 hours, a tip led police to the gunman who had barricaded himself inside an apartment building just a block away from the initial shooting. Oakland SWAT moved in. There was an exchange of gunfire. The gunman was killed, but so too were 2 more Oakland police officers.
When officers arrived on the scene, they discovered 2 officers suffering from apparent gunshot wounds, and they were quickly transported to Highland Hospital. While investigating the incident, the Oakland Police Department received information on the location of the suspect.
The last time an Oakland police officer was killed was in 2004, and now the department will mourn again, not for 1, not for 2, but for 3 of their finest dressed in blue.
When officers gained entry into the apartment, they were immediately fired upon by the suspect with an assault weapon. 2 officers sustained fatal gunshot wounds, and a 3rd officer received a minor wound, a graze wound to his head.
Our hearts go out to the families that at this very moment are experiencing a level of tragedy and loss beyond our ability to comprehend nor to express in words.
Police say the man who killed the officers is 27-year-old Lavell Mixon. The Oakland resident had a no-bail warrant out on him. They say he was on parole for an assault with a deadly weapon. Acting Chief Jordan said the 2nd motor officer who was shot is in grave condition tonight. All 3 officers who were killed were sergeants. Live tonight here in Oakland, Mike Meebeck, KTVU Channel 2 News.
And Oakland police tonight identified the officers who were shot today. They are 40-year-old Sergeant Mark Dunnigan. He had been on the force since 1991. 43-year-old Sergeant Mvin Romans. He had been an Oakland police officer since 1996. 35-year-old Sergeant Dan Sakai, who had been on the force for 9 years. All three of those men died today. 41-year-old Officer John Hagee is hospitalized tonight in grave condition. Police did not name the fifth officer, who they say was grazed and less seriously injured.
Dozens of officers gathered at Highland Hospital in Oakland after the shooting, waiting for word on the conditions of the officers, hoping for the best, but fearing the worst. KTVU's David Stevenson has been there since shortly after the officers were rushed to the emergency room and joins us with a live report. David?
Ken, that's right. Oakland's Highland Hospital was the site of desperate efforts to save those officers' lives on what will certainly go down as one of the worst days in this department's history.
It was pretty intense.
Sergeant Mark Dunnigan and Officer John Hagee were taken to Highland Hospital shortly after they were shot 5 miles away on MacArthur Boulevard. A crowd of their fellow officers rushed ahead to clear the way to the emergency room.
They were stressed out and hyper and
Todd Thomas lives across the street from the emergency room entrance and says he witnessed the attempts to save the wounded officers.
I saw two, but the first one was definitely more severe, and they were stressed out on that one. And the people from inside the hospital were outside waiting for him, and when they got there, they pretty much started pumping on his heart right away, it looked like.
SWAT Officer Dan Sakai and SWAT Sergeant Mvin Romans were brought here shortly after 3 p.m. By then, police had shut down this block of East 31st Street at Stewart Avenue to traffic, as more than a dozen police vehicles crowded around the hospital, and law enforcement officers, friends, and family gathered to await the news.
Everyone is shocked and saddened by this situation.
Hospital spokespersons described the mood inside as somber, but said medical teams quickly shifted into emergency mode.
We're very well equipped to respond to this. We do trauma and mass casualty quite frequently.